So as folks are coming in, please do go ahead and enter your information in the chat. And that's for Rachel and I to understand all the perspectives that are coming to the table. And it's already been helpful to know that we do have multiple audiences and it's not just all kinder or pre-K or at the district level. So we do have a diverse group and we're really excited about that. So thank you. I am going to share my screen and we'll introduce ourselves and jump in here. So for those of you who I don't know, which is most people here, my name is Ellie Cash, and I didn't follow the rules by putting my name in the chat, but my name's Ellie, and I've worked with the state of Nevada for probably a year and a half now, on work specifically on transitions, other early childhood pieces. I was a teacher for 6 years before I turned and started working at the policy systems level. So I'm coming to you all from Washington, D.C. today. I'm with a mission-based organization called Education Council. And the organization itself has been partnered with the state of Nevada for many years now. And I really loved getting to know several communities across the state throughout my time working on transition. So I'll turn over to Rachel to introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Stepina. I work in the Office of Early Learning and Development at our Department of Education, and I'm the birth through third grade education specialist. And we're currently doing a lot of work around the state for transitions to kindergarten. I am also a mother of 3 young children. They are 3.5, just turned 6 and just turned 8. And so I come to this perspective, like experiencing both ends of the spectrum actively. And so I really like to bring that into how we look at the transition to kindergarten, because I'm directly experiencing it and also working alongside Ellie and our department in leading some of these efforts that we'll talk about today.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Let's go ahead and dive in, and Latoya will be very happy to have you. It's a lovely time to be in DC right now. So a little bit of our pieces today, we will start by really giving you an overview of what the transition to kindergarten is so that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about, because in having these conversations, I work with a few other states across the country. Not everybody always knows, right? Like what it all entails. Maybe you're thinking of just the beginning of kindergarten or just the end of pre-K, or whatever perspective you're bringing. So let's all be on the same page about defining what that is. We're going to introduce some resources that are already available to you, one of which is the Nevada's Guide to Supporting the Transition to Kindergarten that was developed in partnership with Education Council last year, and provides a ton of background on what the transition to kindergarten looks like specifically and what's available in Nevada. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into practices that can be most helpful for you and highlight systems level approaches that are already happening. Rachel, am I missing anything there?
Other than we really want to hear your voice as well. So anything at any point, go ahead and just chime in. You don't have to raise your hand to take yourself off of mute. We want to make sure, because transition to kindergarten and family engagement go hand in hand. We also want to make sure that we're able to hear your voices today. So if a question pops up, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can also just take yourself off of mute and chime in that way if you're comfortable.
Yeah, please do. Thanks for adding that, Rachel. So before we dive in, I want you to take the roles we just asked you, your hat of your teacher role or your advocate role, off for a second and put your student hat on, and imagine going back to when you were starting kindergarten, or the last time you remember starting school, and what emotion does that bring, or even is your role as a parent, if you are a parent, what word would you use to describe that? What word? I will say, I'll go ahead and type that in the chat. Mine was excited, definitely. I was a true nerd, so I was very excited for school. What word would you use to describe how you felt before you entered kindergarten? Scary, yes. Hesitant, right? There are a lot of questions. Yeah, exactly. Very overwhelming time. So be thinking about that as well. We are always trying to remember what we can do to help support students and families as they transition, but also like really think about how uncertain that time is for students. And so looking at a transition definition here, you'll note right away, yep, exactly, Marissa, all emotions. You'll know right away that it is not just that month before school starts or the first week of kindergarten even. It's really a year-long process that includes really intentional actions at the state and local level that supports students moving from one grade level to another, or even a school setting. Or we know if you are a kindergarten teacher, you know, especially that most of the students in Nevada are not coming from a pre-K setting. And that's consistent across the country, I will say as well. Many students are coming straight from home or from a childcare setting, possibly. So what really makes those successful are these pieces that are underlined, right? Having positive relationships, making that the priority right away. Really working as a team. That's part of why we're hosting this session today, is working as a team to bring all the people that really contribute in this space and really care about this time in students' lives, as well as aligning those early learning settings. If you're a K teacher, are you talking with your pre-K teachers? Are you talking with the folks who care for children in the community? That means that there needs to be joint professional development as well, and consistent communication with families and members of the community, right? What information is consistently being shared, not just in those select months at the end of the school year and over the summer to the beginning of the next one, but continuously. So that's what we're talking about, a year-long process, right? That these are a couple of misconceptions, right? People really think that it's just that one time of year. Maybe we had our brain stuck in that mode, when in fact it is all year long. Maybe it is you're exclusively thinking about transitioning students from a pre-K classroom to a kindergarten classroom, when in fact, you know, if you're a kindergarten teacher, again, that they're coming from everywhere, right? Not all students have access to kindergarten or pre-K. And then it can't just be a singular responsibility. We can't point fingers at each other. We really have to work together. It takes a team. Yes, and Robin, thank you for adding that. Really working together to determine how the communication will be delivered. That is an ongoing topic of discussion, right? Especially because of the pandemic really highlighted how desperate and how important that need is. So thank you for bringing that up, Robin. And again, a little visual here. It involves all children, whether they're coming from pre-K, and we especially are using the mindset of students furthest from opportunity, the students who are the hardest to reach. We know that Nevada often, and you all might work with students in Native American communities. Well, how are we really creating the foundation as well as the relationships we need so that students from marginalized backgrounds, wherever they're coming from, feel safe and their parents trust the school to bring them there every day, right? How are you beginning that? That's all part of the transition as well. So it takes a lot of readiness, it takes a lot of school readiness and a lot of preparation. We want to acknowledge how much work you all already do to get the students there. And remember that it's a lot of activities. Maybe it's not even just that, week-long screening or however you're doing screening. It takes a lot of, like Robin said, coordinated communication with families, and hopefully where available, pre-K educators as well. So research has been done, and it is, and the reason why we are working on this, one of many reasons, is because of the foundation that research has given us, specifically from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Office of Head Start has resources available that really talk about the results when quality transitions are in place, and these are some of them. We know from the beginning of the past few school years, especially, that it's a high stress time. It's, again, see back to all of the emotions that you all wrote in the chat, right? People like me are excited, but that doesn't mean that you don't have any questions, right? There's a lot of stress there when quality transition is in place. Those socio-emotional pieces, right? Development level of safety in school is higher, right? Because they don't feel as so unsure about, students don't feel as unsure when they entered the learning space. That obviously then leads to their ability to feel safe and then focus on their academics, right? The increased participation of families, which leads to that academic growth. And it does have even stronger benefits for students and children who are, live in poverty. So keep those all in mind as like a foundation for how important it really is. So let's talk about this resource that's already available. That is the Nevada Transition to Kindergarten Guide. And it's pretty document, looks just like this. You can see, like I said, it was published last year, and it has quite a few resources that are already in place for you to think about implementing systems level changes. So that goes down to building a team and planning, implementing activities, and evaluating, continuing to adapt your approaches. And this is a suggested timeline, though, and it is fitting for us making this presentation right now. However, that doesn't mean that, like I said, it's a full year process. So if you enter the planning phase later on in the school year, that's fine. That's, you have to pick up when you have the resources and the time and the personnel available. So this again is a suggested timing. Build a team in the fall so that you can evaluate what activities, what resources are needed to then implement them throughout the year and continue to adapt. This is a screen grab from that guide. So again, be thinking about not just, the mindset of this student. We have a larger group of students than before the pandemic who necessarily might not have been prepared, or they have decreased levels of development, right? We know this from talking to kindergarten teachers. It just looks a little bit different than a few years ago. And what we can do is better prep our schools, our facilities, our personnel. A couple questions to frame that. Are school buildings and staff members prepared to meet these needs? We heard from teachers that there are even more students who didn't necessarily come to school prepared to independently use the bathroom, right? We heard that from many teachers this past year. And we hope that will increase over time as more students are having more access to structured learning spaces than deeper in the pandemic. But what are we doing to prep for those? Do we have knowledge of the developmentally appropriate practices and expectations for how students are entering our classrooms? And then leaders as well. How are we preparing our school leaders? How can we? What does that look like as an educator who is in the classroom? What do you need from your leader to better, so that everybody's on the same page in terms of what our youngest learners need to be successful in their transition to kindergarten? So again, looking at it from the perspective of, are our schools ready for children, no matter how they're entering our schools and our classrooms? Framing what it looks like as well. There's so many pieces to how challenging this time is. One is just, and you all know this, kindergarten is the new first grade, right? Some people say third grade, but well, I'll leave that to your own personal experience. But it's huge, right? And what's even oftentimes for communicating needs, right, can be challenging, is that kindergarten is different than when you and I were in kindergarten, right? It's more challenging. And so when we're talking to parents and families, explaining that is going needs to be purposeful, right? The complexity of the social environment, especially with less students having access to pre-K or any sort of childcare. Maybe they only interacted with their family members, and they don't know um, how a structured learning space looks like. Again, they had less time with teachers, or even if they were coming from a pre-K setting, well, you know, as well as everybody else, that our kindergarten classrooms have more students in them than pre-K classrooms. So that means less dedicated time one-on-one or even in small group settings with teachers. And because, again, because the number of students, that may lead to less direct family time and them in the classroom. So these are just speak to the amount of changes that we need to keep in mind as we're talking about this. This is a visual of that. It is a little, it's from 2019, or excuse me, 2009, as you can see from the citation there. But it just goes to talk about in the early learning setting or in a pre-K or a structured childcare setting, free choice in centers are used more often than in kindergarten classrooms. You need to do more whole group instruction, again, because the class sizes are typically so large. A little bit more time of individual learning. What does that look like for students, right? How are we getting them prepared for that? I hope too, we have some pre-K educators here. We've already hosted conversations pre-K and K together where they can say, well, I know because I sent my students to X school, they have more individual work time. So pre-K teachers are working more to integrate more individual work time into their settings as well, so that students are better prepared for the reality of what's needed in kindergarten. So like I said, this is a little old, but based on our conversations, this specific graph was referenced in the past in those conversations. And I hope that that we're not presenting it to be like, oh, well, kindergarten needs to do more free choice. Well, yes, I think most people would agree with that. But at the end of the day, each classroom has its own specific needs, and we know that teachers are doing their best to meet the needs of students. So when we're talking about vertical alignment of what those pieces are and what changes might need to be made or additions, think about how you might align your curriculum, right? There are a lot of private or community-based pre-K programs and childcare programs. And even if reality sets in, we can't all go out and buy new curriculum, right? But how are we instructing it to make sure that they're developmentally appropriate and as best as possible aligned to one another across classrooms, especially for those districts that do have, locally or state-funded pre-K. How are you using that as an opportunity to align those practices? And then some other questions. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you here, but are you getting together as a pre-K group, as a community pre-K, as district pre-K and kindergarten communities? How can you align those practices? And even in this fourth question here, language consistency, the way that you are explaining certain things in the pre-K classroom, in the K classroom. Can you use the same language, right? So that the students aren't learning, or that lessens the curve, right? Lowers the curve a little bit as students adjust to kindergarten. And so that leads to, again, those developmentally appropriate practices and ways that pre-K and K both work to support all of the developmentally appropriate practices in these buckets here: personal responsibility, self-direction / independence, and critical thinking. We know that especially personal responsibility, like I said, for example, the using the bathroom independently, right? Or being able to work independently on something have been especially challenging because of the pandemic and less students attending pre-K or structured learning settings. So how are we getting creative? How can educators get creative to foster these skills very early on in your setting? And how can you intentionally do that? Use what you're learning right now at the beginning of the school year about how students are are learning and what they're bringing to the classroom to foster those, to grow in those skills. And I also added a question here specifically about administrators, right? Knowing the increased challenge, how can school leaders, district leaders support and provide time for this development to take place? In some districts, they are adding more staff, right? District-based staff are in schools at the beginning of the school year to support these specific social, emotional and needs, right? Help just having more adults in the school, in the classroom to foster this growth. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. Oop, you're on mute.
Always going to happen, sorry. Before I explain this slide and some of the systems approaches that we currently have in place around the state, I would love to hear, again, either take yourself off mute or put it in the chat, based on the definition that we've discussed so far and some of these key components, the transition to kindergarten guide. How's this impacting you now based on the role that you've shared? What have you noticed so far in the year? Were you already aware of the transition guide itself? So just, I'm going to pause for a minute for to receive that kind of reflection in the chat. I don't have it as a prompt on the screen, but I can put it in the chat as well. So I'm going to give us a minute to type out our thoughts on that or reflect on that by taking off mute.
Good morning.
Good morning, Latoya.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing good on this Saturday morning, and you?
No complaints. I'm just listening in to all of this great information. At my school, I think we're doing a few of these things where we are getting together with kindergarten teachers and discussing the expectations on what they want our kids to be doing by the time they get to kinder. However, I feel like there's a huge disconnect because in early childhood education and their practices, we want the kids to be able to have more independence and control in the classroom to be able to make their own choices. Where when they get over to kinder, now the expectations are you already need to know how to work a computer, take an iReady exam, follow directions, and know how to write your name and even read. I'm like, I know some grown-ups that are kind of dyslexic, so the expectations are really high. But I think definitely having discussions such as these so that we can figure out where the gap is, because it's a happy medium. I know they want them to know how to write. I know they want them to know how to recognize all their letters, but for some, they just get it when they get it. It's so hard. It's so hard. I just wanted to give my feedback and say thank you guys for the information and some ideas, because now I'm going to go into my kindergarten teachers' rooms and see what language they're using, like as far as math concepts. Because even if we're eating carrots and I'm like, okay, you guys have, how many carrots are in there? You guys got 11 carrots. Do you have 11 too? Did you make, well, if I ate 2 of them, how many do we have left? Just even giving them that language all day long. But the last keynote speaker did say, we are quizzing them all day long, and the conversations need to be authentic, and we have to catch them in what they're doing because they're already interested. So when we catch them at what they're already interested in doing, man, the connection is that much more powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate hearing your voice. And then Robin, I see that you also put in a question or a comment in the chat as well. I definitely have noticed those same things, Latoya, and that disconnect is a very real experience across all of the different mixed delivery and entry point settings that we have. So one of the things at the systems level in the state that we are actively implementing is it's called a P3, that means preschool to third grade leadership academy, where we have a cohort of administrators and principals at the school level, because we know that while teachers may have developmentally appropriate practices, the opportunity, they may understand some of those things, they may need some more professional development, but without the support of their administrators, they can't really go very far in that within this transition period. And so across the state, we have a cohort of 20 different administrators actively participating, and they range from early childhood like provider administrators in the 0 to 5 space, and then also our kindergarten through third grade elementary administrators, and some district personnel as well. So there's a lot of movement at the state level working at having a more unified systematic approach to strengthening the practices of our administrators. And then in companion to that, we also have some developmentally appropriate practice kindergarten cohorts to strengthen those practices within the kindergarten teacher level as well. We just launched the cohort for the end of this year. They fill up like that, so we know the demand and the need is it's there, it's demonstrated, and that our kindergarten teachers really want to be able to move forward in this space and be able to support our families and our children during this whole transition process. So those are just 2 things that I wanted to highlight right here. And then we have about 20 minutes left in our session, or is it 15? Just to give ourselves a time check here. And we do have some breakouts planned as well. So we'll see if we get there. But again, hearing your voice and your feedback in the chat is also extremely helpful and continues to move our conversations forward. I'm going to turn it back to you, Ellie.
Thanks. And I'm gonna push through a couple pieces here really quickly. So I'm just telling you that up front, that I'm doing that really fast. It is focus, a way to look at this. There are many ways to kind of frame and talk about transitions and the how-to of it all, really making it applicable for you all. One of those, you can look at it this way. It's these connections to school, the child to school, the family to school, the program to school, and the community to school. And then this is what it can look like in each of those settings, right? The child to school, well, we can help them talk about and practice kindergarten routines earlier on, right? Who said that in the chat, the routines piece, right? Like it's totally such an important piece of the day that isn't necessarily reading or new number concept, right? Like it's not the academic topics, but it's really what to make the classroom successful. And then another example that communities have really enjoyed are down here in this family school piece, a summer activity calendar, and connecting families to the schools and connecting families to other families at the school level that create the relationship and the level of safety and comfort that some families need to really be connected to the school, and therefore the child to be connected to the school. So the next few slides are quite a few wordy pieces of examples that you can consider in contributing to the overall systems. I will acknowledge that those are already a huge addition to what you're already doing, but just wanted to acknowledge that it would be an addition, right? But these are new things, right? Like sharing student strengths and areas. You probably already do that, right? You're already having those conversations, but how can you link up with the kindergarten teachers if possible? What could that look like? Of course, you might not reach every student, but it's an example, right? Of sharing information that's going to be valuable to the families, as well as to the kindergarten teacher. For kindergarten teachers at the beginning of the year, how can you go beyond just introducing yourself by explaining those procedures, explaining those routines, maybe even get a child and a picture of the student and their family so that they know that they're physically there somewhere in the classroom, put that up somewhere in the classroom, right? A family wall. And then ongoing throughout the year, are you doing classroom observations? Can you, even if you're a community-based program, you know that a certain number of your students go to X school, Y school, Z school every single year. Can you create a relationship, or kindergarten school leaders, can you encourage your administration to create a relationship with community-based pre-K programs and allow those classroom observations to take place, foster that relationship so that you can, that language alignment is there, right? Even joint professional development is the second bullet point on there. And I know that that might be a little down the road a little bit, but create the space for that to happen. Start talking to those people and use this conference even as a way to do that. Hey, I saw you were at this conference too, or I was just at this family engagement concert. I'd really love to connect with you about what we learned, you know, use it as an example. Rachel, I'll turn back to you for this part.
Thanks. I'm going to go through these next 4 slides again super quickly. We put the link in the chat so you guys can access this information as well and follow up if you have questions about it. So our why at the state level is we really take a birth through 3rd grade approach to early learning so that every child has the right. We know that every child has the right to equitable learning opportunities, and we want those to be high quality, developmentally appropriate spaces. And so some of the leadership opportunities that I explained a little earlier, they are part of that puzzle. But the full birth through 3rd grade approach or early learning continuum is really a dynamic space that requires the participation of all contributors to the system. So that really must require that emphasis on our families and their experiences, and then also the connections between the kindergarten and the preschool, or the families that are never in preschool, especially considering our most vulnerable populations. So this is one of the pillars of why we continue doing this work and why we continue to push our state towards adopting this and supporting this full birth through 3rd grade approach for the early learning continuum. And so that transition, while it's very heavily focused into kindergarten, also takes place along, you can go ahead into the next slide. It's across the vertical spectrum, and it's also within each grade and setting. And so thinking of those transitions and how they impact our children in multiple ways is one of those important considerations. Go ahead and skip to the next, actually just go forward 2. So currently across the state, we are also participating in a Transforming Kindergarten Collaborative in partnership with West Ed. And this is a state, multiple state partnership. And so a lot of our state level offices are participating in this, and some of the work you'll see reflected in the transition guide itself. And then actively, we are applying for a $10 million per year preschool development grant focused on birth through age 5. But the seamless transition period and supporting the transition to kindergarten is a major part of that application. And so we're writing it. I'm actually writing it right now, and we've got a lot of different strategies coming to support the state, including I mean, if we receive the award, we'll know by the end of the year, but including this transition to kindergarten, where we will be able to go into some more direct learning spaces and support the transition to kindergarten planning in teams. And then I'm just going to pause there so we can move into our next activity, which is taking a look. You can go ahead and open up the transition to kindergarten guide that we put the link in the chat. And we're going to move into breakout rooms for about 7 minutes. No, let's do 5 or 6. There's okay. 4 of us in each room in that way. So Ellie, go ahead and switch to the next slide. Yep. We want to be able to consider some of these things, and we'll copy and paste these into the chat so you can have them when you're in there. And why is the transition to kindergarten important to you? A couple different things that you've picked up today, highlights, different things that you could implement. And then also, who would you work with if you were forming that team? If you were able to go back into your classrooms on Monday and begin these conversations, who would you go to first? And then where would you look to in expanding that network and that team? So those are a couple things that we'll want to hear. Then we'll come back together for group sharing in just a minute. So.
Yeah, I will break you out into 2 rooms, and then Rachel and Ellie, I'll throw you into 2 separate ones.
Thank you.
Does that work? And
Yep.
then what time we have about 10 minutes left. Well, how long?
We'll just do 5 minutes. I think we'll, between the 4 participants in each room, we can at least generate some of these. So just 5 minutes.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Kelly, Monica, do you want to kick us off with what really rose to the top of your conversation? Oh, and that looks like we have everybody else. Hello. I just invited Monica and or Kelly to share what rose to the top of their conversation.
Monica, would you like to share?
Okay, I can't make any guarantees. There's gonna be no children or anything here in the background.
Okay.
We just talked about the differences. You know, I work in a pre-K classroom that's an inclusion classroom. So we have students with IEPs and I'm the special ed teacher. But a lot of our kinder teachers, we've really had to talk to because we tend to focus in pre-K on socialization, working in a group, the language skills, just those really foundation learning to learn learning to learn things. But then some of the kinder teachers, they're like, well, we want them to know, more academic things coming in. Like they want them to know all their letters. They want them to know all, and it's not realistic. Excuse me. It's not realistic so much for us. And we really, they've lost the sight maybe of what pre-K is and that gap between pre-K and kinder.
Yeah, so those discrepancies between priorities that we talked about earlier on in the session, sounds like you are experiencing that in a little different way, but still quite similar. We're running super short on time, so I'm sorry about that. But I know that in our breakout group, Latoya really spoke to the possibility to really do those classroom observations. Like she saw that as an opportunity. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and how that would be helpful in your school setting. Rachel, anything you want to share from your group?
We had a lot of great ideas, but it was highlighting the children's experience, that they feel safe in this transition, and that the family connection is one of those important pieces as part of how they're welcomed into the school, and who's with their children during the day, and increasing those feelings of safety and understanding of what's going on. So that was part of what we had talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So our last slide here, thanks, Rachel, just has this list of resources. And I know that both Matthew and Rachel put the link to these slides in the chat earlier, but this is some national as well as state-based resources that are available for you, starting with the standards all the way down to the document we've already spoken about, the Nevada Transition Guide. These links here at the bottom are from the HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, which houses Head Start. And they have these calendars that are extremely detailed. So I'm prefacing that there's a lot on there, but they have a lot of practices in addition to the ones that we shared today that might help you think about what is even more opportunities to make the transition accessible, positive, and healthy for the students and families in your location. So sorry for running a minute over, but thank you all so much for your engagement today. And we hope that these resources really provide an on-ramp for you to begin implementing more transition activities at your school, or in your location, wherever you are. So thank you so much. Rachel and I would just both put our emails in the chat, and it was great to be with you all this morning.